Hey folks, how's it going? So, as some of you may be aware, there is a public test going on for the new Civil War weapons that are be coming out. So that's roughly 3067, 3068 timeline weapons. Those who have played MechWarrior 3 and MechWarrior 4 will be pretty familiar with these weapon systems. Some of them are going to be favorites to some of y'all as well who have played tabletop and are quite familiar with them. So, I figured I would do a quick little talking about video, show a little bit of it off, but I won't be playing any matches because it is only 4v4 currently in the public test, and I don't really feel like that's a good indicator of how these weapon systems would perform in a live environment, simply because everyone's running experimental builds anyways. So I don't feel like that would be a good reflector of or indicator of how these things, like I said before, would perform in a live environment. So I'll just go down the list and talk about them and tell you how they perform, how they work, advantages, disadvantages, stuff like that for those of you who aren't so familiar with these or cannot play the public test. For whatever reason, maybe you're busy at work or life or, something gets in the way. But anyways, I'll be giving my impressions about them and maybe some possible changes they could do for it, for these weapon systems, because I will say, like, overall, it's very promising right now with this new tech, but it does need a lot of polish. It could use some adjustment, but overall, it seems like a lot of these weapon systems, honestly, are super fun to use, and they're pretty cool, and they allow you to do a lot of cool stuff that you couldn't do with your mechs before. Tweak it to just the way you want it to be, and really. Like, if you want to really specialize in something, then you can absolutely do that with these new weapon systems coming out. If you want, super heavy ballistics and just blow your opponents away with large amounts of DACA, you can do that. Or if you want to go the Macross route and have, a missile massacre, you can definitely do that too. Both clan and IS side, so that's cool. Few new energy weapons. Those who like PPCs will have a lot to choose from when the Civil War patch comes out. There's also stealth armor, which is pretty cool. How useful that is, we'll talk about that when we get to it. And of course, the Inner Sphere gets one of the biggest upgrades ever, which is the light fusion engines, and those are absolutely awesome. So the clans will no longer have the monopoly on super duper engines and side torso vulnerability and stuff like that, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So I'm going to start out with the Inner Sphere side first, and I'm just going to go down the list. So let's get right into it. So let's start out with ballistics. So first up on the list here, we're going to go through the machine gun variants that they've added. So in addition to regular machine guns, we're now going to have light machine guns and heavy machine guns. Now, light machine guns, as you can see the stats there, and I'll let you guys pause and look at that, they do less damage than a regular machine gun, but they have a much greater range, all the way out to 240 optimal and 480 absolute maximum. So, give you more range at the trade-off of less damage. So I personally don't think these are very useful. I didn't like them much in MechWarrior 3. I never used them really. But if you're, if you got an extra slot lying around and some extra tonnage you don't know what to do with, couldn't hurt. So the counterpart to that will be the heavy machine gun, and I'll leave the stats up here for you. Every weapon system, I'll pull up the stats so you guys can pause the video and take a look at it, and the resolution on this video should be good enough that you guys can make out the numbers. Because I don't feel like reading all the stats here, because that's boring to me. Anyway, so heavy machine guns are a little bit heavier. They do more damage and have less range, and their ammo count is also reduced by half. So normally a ton of machine gun ammunition for lights and regulars will give you 2,000 rounds. Heavy machine gun will only give you 1,000. But seeing as how machine guns are pretty ammo efficient anyways, I don't foresee this being a problem. So, these do more damage, have less range. I think these are pretty useful if used, in large numbers. So basically, if you took any mech that uses a large number of machine guns now and put it with heavy machine guns, it would do a lot better. because the spread for these machine guns are so high anyways that you would really want to use them, below, I'd say 100 meters, maybe even closer than that. So these things definitely rip up people pretty good, even with armor. As far as I know, the crit rate for these things have not changed. At least I haven't seen any indication to indicate anything else. So I would say that they currently, right now, have the same crit rate as regular machine guns, which is pretty high. So they can still be useful for that. So that's the machine gun variants. Now we'll go on to Gauss variants, and Inner Sphere gets quite a few of these. So we'll start out with the light Gauss rifle here. And continuing the trend here, light Gauss rifles way less. They do less damage. They only do 8 as compared to 15, so that's almost it's a little bit more than half, a little less than half taken off. They have a longer range, and they have a actually, do they have the same cooldown? Let's check. That's 5 and no, actually they have the same cooldown. So in other games, actually, the light Gauss rifle had a quicker cooldown than the regular Gauss rifle did, but this one does not. So it's basically just a lighter, longer range, lower damage variant of the Gauss rifle. So whether or not that's useful, I'd leave it up to people's personal preference. I don't think personally it's worth the wait. It wasn't really worth the wait in tabletop, and I pretty much am going to say it's going to be the same situation here. Now, the projectile speed would be interesting to note. So, regular Gauss rifle has 2,000 projectile speed, and the light Gauss also has 2,000. So, it doesn't even get a velocity increase, which I think it absolutely should have to match the increased range. So, as it stands right now, I don't think light Gauss rifles are really worth it. Some people might like them, but I don't. So, I think light Gauss rifles also have a better ammo efficiency. I think they get more shots per ton. So that's that. Now, to the real big bad boy, we go on to the heavy Gauss rifle. Now, these things are freaking awesome. So, heavy Gauss rifles can only go in side torsos. As far as I know, there's no mech that can mount them in the arms. And it takes up 11 of the 12 slots in a torso, which means heavy Gauss rifle mechs cannot have XLs or light fusion engines. They must carry standards. So that's very important to note when you encounter these things on the field, because side torsoing them is not going to work. Now, if they implemented this correctly, and I'm not sure if they have or not, but if they have, these things, when they explode, would deal a lot more internal damage than a regular Gauss rifle would, and that's the way it should be. Whether or not they did that, though, I don't know for sure. So the main selling point of these heavy Gauss rifles is they do an absolute shit ton of damage, like 25 up from 15. That's nuts. So it does more damage than an AC-20. The downside is it has incredible recoil. It's massive. The ammo efficiency is crap. It gets like 5 shots per ton. And if you look at the optimal range down there, it's 180 meters. So that means at 180 meters, you'll be doing 25 damage, but anything beyond that, you'll be doing progressively less, all the way out to 810, which is 0 damage. Now, that is in keeping with tabletop values. Heavy Gauss rifles did different damage based on the range that you shot them at, so that's cool. These things have a longer cooldown and half the projectile speed of regular Gauss rifles. So, also when you fire these things in game, it's actually really, really cool. Your screen will actually shake, and your reticle will also shake, as if like when you're using jump jets, you know how your reticle shakes, right? That's the same thing that'll happen with a heavy Gauss rifle when you fire it, and it lets out this huge boom, and it's so cool. These will definitely be fun to play with once they come out to a live environment. Now, so yeah, the maximum number you can see on a mech is 2. I think the Mauler and the Cyclops right now can do that. King Crabs unfortunately cannot, because like I said before, these cannot fit in the arms. So maybe we'll see the Fafnir someday, with these things hanging around. So very cool gun. I like it. I think the fun factor for heavy Gauss rifle is like off the charts. And whether or not it's an actual combat situation, I won't really speak to any effect to that, because it's a It's a hard to use weapon, I'll tell you that much, because the charge times are also different for some reason. The charge up time is different between heavy Gauss rifles and the other Gauss rifles. It messes with people's muscle memory. It did with mine, anyways. So something to watch out for. Also, if you take half tons of ammo for this, you actually lose out one shot. So 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, not 3 or 2. So, but in this game, when you do a half ton, you only get 2 shots, not 3. So that's something else to watch out for as well. Okay. After that, you got the rest of the LBX autocannons. Because before we only had 10s, now we have the full range from 2s all the way to 20s. So these pretty much work just like the clan versions do. 2s are going to fire very fast, have a long range and a low spread, but also low damage. 5s are going to be the middle ground. 10s we already have, and then 20s are pretty for just how large they are. They also take 11 slots up, which means these things cannot fit in arms of Inner Sphere mechs. I don't expect them to do split criticals like you could in tabletop. So certain mechs that we could expect from 3067 timeline, like the Lao Hu, for instance, Capellan mech, that has an LBX-20 in the arm, but it's split criticals. I don't expect to see that in the game unless they can figure that out. Now, if I could, that'd be excellent, because then you could have a, I don't know, a Jaeger mech with 2 LBX-20s and the arms is kind of roaming around, and that'd be kind of cool. But yeah, so you got your whole range of LBX autocannons. I will say, as far as like fun factor, these definitely aren't as fun. For some reason, they just don't sound good. They don't sound meaty. Like the LBX-20 for the clans just sounds like a big freaking cannon. It's really satisfying to fire. But the ones in the Inner Sphere, not really. They don't sound satisfying to fire. So that's all I'm gonna say about that. After the LBXs, we have the full range of Ultras as well. Now these are definitely interesting to note. They work sort of like the clan ones. So, as you know, the clan Ultras do a burst fire thing with progressively more pellets per autocannon class, right? So the Inner Sphere ones work the same way, except 2s and 5s will still only fire one projectile, one solid projectile. The 10 will fire 2 projectiles, and the 20 will fire 3 in a rapid fire stream. So, I've heard Ultra 20s are pretty inefficient and quite heavy. They basically chew through ammo way too fast, so they might have to do a buff for that. I think they just did a straight tabletop copy, so they don't really have that much ammo at all. But these things are still very lethal, and I expect them to see some use. Obviously, they're Inner Sphere, so they're gonna be a bit heavier and a bit bulkier than the clan equivalents, but they're there. And if you like the clan Ultras, then you'll like the Inner Sphere Ultras too. So, finally, where you'll get to the rotary autocannons. These are so much fun to shoot. Not very effective, but they're very fun to shoot. So the way the mechanics work for rotaries is they have a spin up time. So you hold down the fire button and it spins up. And certain models you can actually see the barrel spin, and then it'll start firing very fast. Individual projectiles, the individual projectiles themselves aren't going to do that a whole lot of damage. It's just the fact that they're firing so fast. Think of like an A10 gun. It makes me think of that. So while this thing is firing, though, it builds up this little meter where your weapons are at, and it fills up, and when it fills up, it goes to red. Now, when you're in the red, there is a chance at any time that the rotaries could jam. So when they jam, they stop firing, they spin down, and you have to wait until they unjam themselves, just like an Ultra would. So that's how those work. Now, I think currently there is a bug with the ghost heat with these things, because if you have a rotary 2, and a rotary 5 together, firing at the same time, like you overheat in like 3 seconds or something like that. It's real fast, and I think they need to work on that because that doesn't really make much sense for me. Well, to me, to have a rotary 2 and 5 have ghost heat. That doesn't really seem very, I don't know, dangerous to me. So these things are very, very heavy, pretty bulky. They're quite ammo efficient from what I've seen, and the range is actually not that bad. Kind of medium range. They're not going to reach out and touch someone, but they're not super short range either. So right in the middle of the road. So on Inner Sphere weapons, I would definitely say these are absolutely the top of the fun list. These are just so much fun to go into a match and just just stare at somebody, shoot them down. It doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't honestly do a whole lot of damage compared to other things you could be doing. But I mean, it's so much fun anyways. Who cares, right? I gotta say, it was pretty cool to see like a king crab with rotaries in the arms. It's just devastating. So I think these could definitely use a bit of a damage buff, just only slightly, not too much. Because they will shake you and rock you, and they're very, very annoying to get hit by. Because if you've ever encountered, let's say, an AC2 Mauler, for instance, right, like a 6 AC2 Mauler, and you have a guy using like a macro, so it just fires like super, super, super fast, and it just rocks your screen like crazy. That's basically what it's like getting hit by one of these things. It's about the same. So you too can shake someone's world up. So that is it for Inner Sphere Ballistics. A lot of fun choices here. I quite like what they've come out with and how they work. Could use a little bit of polish on some of these, but overall not too bad. So there we'll go to energy weapons. Now there's quite a lot here added as well, and we'll go right down the list. So starting out, we have the rest of the laser classes for extended range lasers. So we have the ER large laser, the ER small, and the ER medium now. So pretty straightforward with these. They weigh the same as the regular standard lasers, but they have a longer range, longer duration, and higher heat. But they do the same amount of damage. So it's all about what you want to do with these things. If you want the range, you can do it. If you don't need the range, don't use them. Simple as that. I will say the ER small and the ER medium in-game sound really, really cool. It doesn't quite jive with the ER large. The ER large still just sounds like a large laser. Maybe they'll change that. I hope they do, because whoever did the sounds for the small and the medium, it's just so cool. I like it a lot. So from there, we'll get into all the different flavors of PPC, because there are definitely tons of those. So we'll get right out with let's go with the light PPC first. So light PPC, as my friend described it to me, is a giant medium ER laser. So it still has the minimum range, but it does half the damage, and the range I think is the same as a regular PPC. So 5 damage, same damage as a medium laser, just with a longer range, and it's a single projectile, not a duration laser. So the real notable things with this weapon is that it only takes up 2 slots, which means you can it's more compact. You can fit it in more places, and you can fit it in the center torso, which means which means something like a Locust 1V, for instance, with the torso mount, can put one of these in its torso. So, interesting thing to watch out for. I personally don't think they're very efficient damage to heat wise. I'd rather just have a medium laser, to be honest. But I think these PPCs will find their appropriate niches as we go on in the live environment. So, after that, we're going to move on to snub nose. Snub nose are pretty cool. Snub nose PPCs don't have a minimum range. That's like their entire selling point. They still do the same amount of damage as a regular PPC, which is 10, so that's pretty respectable. They weigh 1 ton less than a regular PPC, but also have significantly reduced range. So as you can see down there, their optimal range is 270 as opposed to 540. So that is a pretty big cut. So also their max range fall off is quite significant. So they're not meant for long range. So a brawler's PPC, if you will. So these things are pretty cool. I like them simply because it's a PPC without a minimum range, and they are also only 2 critical slots large, which means you can fit them in more places and the center torso. So you could definitely see a Locust with one of these things running around shooting people, so something to consider as well. If you really want to cram tons of PPCs into something, Snub Nose sounds like a good choice to me. So, and finally, we have the heavy PPC. Now, these things were absolutely brutal in tabletop. They did 15 damage, I think, just like the regular clan PPC did. It was basically the Inner Sphere's clan PPC. Wasn't anywhere near as efficient, weighed a lot more. It's a big, heavy freaking thing, you know, but it was an absolute monster if you used it correctly. So, the big deal with these things is, obviously, they do more damage. They're bigger. They weigh more. Do more heat, so big heavy honking thing. The only thing is, though, they have implemented the splash mechanics that the clan PPCs do. So with these heavy PPCs, they don't do 15 total damage, they do 12. I don't know why they did that, because the tabletop's supposed to do 15 if I recall correctly. So maybe they thought it was too powerful, I don't know. So these things only do 12, but they also do splash. So when I was testing these out, I would go up to a mech and I'd shoot him with a heavy, and I would see the location I hit, let's say the center torso, right? But also the 2 other side torso locations light up for damage. So that means this has the same splash mechanic as the clan does. So I'm not exactly sure how much damage is transferred over. If they're keeping in the same 10 damage base for one component, I would assume it would be a 1 damage to one location, 1 damage to the other, and 10 on the actual component that you hit. That makes the most sense to me. I don't have hard numbers for this, so I can't tell for sure if it's one way or the other. So, as it stands right now, I would barely consider these more efficient than a regular Inner Sphere ER PPC, which I don't ever use really. So they just cause too much heat for too little damage. I don't like them personally in this game. Tabletop, I think they were much better. So that's that. So that is all the new energy weapons, and we'll go right into missiles next. So missiles got quite a lot added to them as well. Inner Sphere gets to have all the fun, right? So we have, let's go with the MRMs first. MRM stands for Medium Range Missile. These things are basically like missile shotguns. They're meant for, you know, they're labeled medium range, but honestly, like, the max range of 450, I don't think you're really going to hit a whole lot with these due to how they work in game. So the mechanic is, for these, wherever you're aiming, that's where all of them will go when you fire. So it doesn't matter how much you move, how much you twist, where you're at, wherever you're aiming, that's where all the missiles are going to go. So you can't spray a whole area down with them. They are only going to go exactly where you shoot them. So it's kind of hard to lead with these things because they don't all come out at once. They come out in a stream. Excuse me. They come out in a stream like clan LRMs do, right? So I guess that's to prevent, you know, way too much alpha damage, which is fine. But as it stands now, the mechanic is a little wonky. It's not very practical unless someone's standing still or isn't moving very fast, or you're at extremely close range. So I personally don't like how these are implemented right now. They'll probably change them later to be so that you can spread it depending on where you're aiming. That would make the most sense to me. So MRMs are traditionally pretty high damage, kind of middle tonnage, and a lot of heat and quite ammo inefficient. They run out of ammo very quickly, which is what I've found to be the case in most of my experiments with these. So I would definitely say they have a place in this game. They will see use. I don't doubt that. These are a lot of fun to play with because I mean, come on, it's 40 missiles out of one, missile hardpoint. So you get like something like an archer with like 9 missile hardpoints. You just load it up with tons of these things, man, and oh, oof. Missile massacre for days. But they're just going to be hard to use with their current iteration and mechanics. So I hope that sees an update soon. So overall, pretty fun. Next up is everyone's favorite, rocket launchers. Rocket launchers are unique in that they are a one-shot weapon system. They have no associated ammo with them. It's just, they take up a lot of space. Well, crit slots, I should say. They're very, very light. And their claim to fame is that they do a lot of damage in one shot, and that's it. So, if you have a spare missile hardpoint and you have nothing else to fill it up with, and you got spare tonnage, or you just want some extra firepower for, that last-ditch effort, that's what these rocket launchers are for. Now, I've seen people try to load these things up on, like, a suicide mech, basically, where it's just tons of rocket launchers and nothing else, and they'll kill maybe 1 or 2 mechs, and then they don't do anything for the rest of the match. So, I think that's not really a problem, because it's so much put up to chance with how good your aim is, how defensive the enemy is, whether or not the server is agreeing with you that day, who's torrenting on your network, and stuff like that. So if your latency is bad, you're gonna have a bad time with these. So Australian players, I wouldn't really recommend. You guys kind of get the shaft when it comes to internet. But anyways, these things can be fun to use, although they feel a bit cheesy, kind of cheap to me. I probably won't use them very much because you can't really get high damage numbers over a match with these. So like if you load out your mech with only rocket launchers, you can only expect maybe 400 to 500 damage max. So, but yeah, if you use them for their intended purpose, which is a one-shot, last-ditch kind of extra firepower thing, they're not that bad. They do a lot of damage. Pretty okay projectile speed. They fly kind of quick. The spread isn't too bad. Although I wouldn't fire these at 540 meters. I don't think they're going to hit what you're aiming at, personally. So that's that. Next thing up is we get the full range of streak missiles. So now we have 4s and 6s in addition to the 2s. I don't think I need to explain those too much to y'all because I'm sure we've all been on the receiving end of a streak crow before. So that's how those work. It's just the same system, just with a bigger missile. So from that, I will go to equipment. New Inner Sphere equipment. So as you can see over here in the upgrade section, they've changed the menus to be drop downs now instead of just a left-right kind of tab selection. So starting out, there's 2 new armor types. You have light ferrofiber and stealth armor, which let me pull up a stealth mech real quick. So the cool thing about stealth armor is it can only go on mechs that have ECM. So you see the stealth armor right there. You must have ECM installed for this thing to work. If you're running an ECM mech, I don't see why you wouldn't have ECM installed. Just, it's kind of what you do. So what stealth armor does is it's basically it works like how ECM used to when it first came out. It hides you from literally everyone. So the only way someone's going to see you is visually. So that means you're not going to have any lock-on data. You're not going to have a little red triangle above your head or anything like that. It's just going to be the physical mech. So you won't be able to see like a paper doll. You won't be able to lock on at missiles, nothing like that, which is pretty powerful. But at the same time, they might fix this later, your teammates also cannot tell the difference between you and enemy stealth armor mech. So if you and an enemy both had stealth armor on, they would not be able to tell which one was on their team. So that can lead up to some pretty funny friendly fire incidents if you're not careful. So they may fix that later. I don't think that's intended for the teammates not to be able to see you. That doesn't really make much sense to me, and it seems kind of against gameplay if you ask me. The other thing about stealth armor is that you do not dissipate heat while it is on. So if the ambient temperature is not low enough to lower your mech's operations as you're working, you will slowly build up heat until you are literally cooking yourself. So you have to disable it to start venting heat. Kind of reminds me of Mass Effect, actually, and the Normandy systems. If you remember, if any of you guys have played the first game, and you talk to the engineer down there in the engine bay, he'll talk basically. It's kind of the same system where like it keeps all the heat inside, so you're not radiating anything. But if you keep it on too long, you're going to cook yourself. It's basically the same idea. So that's pretty cool. In addition to stealth armor, we have Light Pharaoh. Light Pharaoh is cool because you can put it. It only takes up 7 critical slots as opposed to 14, but it does not give you the same weight savings as regular Pharaoh armor would. So, kind of build specific. It's not something really I'd expect most players to use. Kind of like how Pharaoh is not really used much by most builds. But I mean, if you got the critical space for it and you can, I don't know, put like a bigger engine or something, you know, go for it. And yeah, that's it for armor. So, we'll move on to engines next. So, the absolute biggest change, I think, for Inner Sphere that's going to come in the Civil War update is the light engines. Now, light engines are super cool because, like in XL, they take up slots in the left and right torso, and I'll demonstrate that right here. So, as you can see, you get the light engine over here and over here. But the cool thing is, it only takes up 2 slots on each side torso as opposed to 3. Which means not only do you get more space to do other things with, you can also survive a side torso destruction. But only one, not both, just one. Because you need 3 engine crits for your engine to go completely. So, the drawback, of course, is that light engines only give you a 75% weight savings as opposed to the XL's 50%. Meaning that a light engine of the same rating as a standard engine will weigh 25% less. XLs weigh 50% less. So there's a bit of a drawback there, but I expect most people will switch to light engines simply due to the survivability factor, and you still get pretty decent speed with light engines. So I expect people to use those a lot more. Also, light engines are really, really cheap compared to XLs. So if you go to like a light engine on a 340, right, it's 4.1 million. You go to an XL 340, and it's, you know, 5.5. That's a lot more than 4.1. So more expensive. I think for a lot of newer players, they'll probably switch, just go straight to light engines, like just straight up. I don't expect light mechs to use light engines though, because XLs still give them that extra speed, and light mechs are so fragile anyways. I don't really expect people to use lights that much in light mechs. So that's pretty cool. I expect a lot of meta changes, build changes with these light engines when they come in. They're just really, really cool. I like them a lot. They're useful on tabletop as well, so I expect that to be no different here. Now, that's it for engines. Next up is targeting computers. So, Inner Sphere now gets access to targeting computers, and they work the exact same way as clan targeting computers do. So as you can see down there, they give you zoom boost, sensor range, targeting time, blah blah blah, projectile speed, critical chance, etc., etc. So yeah, these are more tailored, obviously. If you have the weight and the tonnage, or you feel like building around it, that's what these are for. I don't expect these to see a lot of play, honestly. So those are kind of boring. And lastly, we have a new kind of AMS, a laser AMS. So this thing is pretty neat. I'll just call it the LAMS because that's what it's labeled in MechWarrior 4. That's where I know it from. So laser AMS is cool because it takes a regular AMS and just makes it a laser instead. So the trade-off obviously is it'll make heat, not that much heat, but it'll still make it while it's active. Active meaning like actively shooting down missiles, not when you're just carrying it. And of course the best part is that it does not use ammo, so you can keep it going forever as long as your mech can take the heat. So that is pretty cool, I think, because personally I don't like having a lot of ammo dependent weapons on my mechs because, you know, they can run out. So that is that for equipment for Inner Sphere. Now, unfortunately, in the public test, they did not include any of the Civil War mechs, which is kind of unfortunate. I really wanted to test them out, but we'll have to wait until those come out. So that is it for Inner Sphere. We'll switch over to clans now. So let's take, why not? Let's take a Hellbringer. So, let me get my notes here. Okay, so with clans, we'll go down the exact same way. Start off with the ballistics, energy, and then go to missile and equipment. Alright, so ballistics. Like the Inner Sphere, they have access to light and heavy machine guns. They work the exact same way. Lights do less damage and have a longer range. Heavy machine guns do more damage and have a shorter range and less ammo per ton. That's actually it for the ballistics. They didn't add too much for them yet. I kind of wish they had incorporated hags. That would have been nice to see, but maybe they're just not up for the coding or whatever. I'm able to introduce them later. I don't know. But next up for clans would be hags if they decide to take that extra step. So let's go to energy weapons. Clans didn't really get too much here either. A lot of weird weapons that, very, very kind of heavily specialized weapons. So we'll start out with the ER micro laser. Now this is kind of interesting. It's a very, very, very small laser, as the name suggests. Not a whole lot of damage, not a whole lot of range, not a whole lot of anything really. But I did find these to be pretty useful when I was testing them out. They're just very efficient weapons, and the fact that they only weigh a quarter ton, which means you find a clan mech with a ton of energy hard points, which is there's plenty of that walking around, and just load up a mech with tons of these things, and you have a pretty decent brawler configuration set up for these things. They're not bad. I wouldn't say they're gonna absolutely blow the meta out of the water, and they're so amazing and awesome. They're gonna be the new I don't know, clan small pulse laser replacement. I wouldn't go that far, but they are pretty nifty. So, and the fact they weigh a quarter of a ton, I think, is their biggest selling point. So, in addition, there is a pulse version of it, which I don't like nearly as much. The range on these are absolute crap, as you can tell. The optimal range down there is 90 meters. And that is so low. Like, they didn't even accept that in the closed beta way back when. Like, Inner Sphere small lasers, for instance, originally, way back when, had an optimal range of 90 meters as well. But they knew that was, during testing, that was so low that nobody ever used it. And it was just an unused weapon, so they changed it later to be what it is basically today, which is I think like 120 meters or something like that. Anyways, these things have an absolutely terrible range. The duration damage and all that, this weapon doesn't really feel worth it to me. Honestly, I think I'd rather just take a small pulse laser or an ER small in its place. So, after that, we have the heavy laser range. Heavy, small, heavy, medium, and heavy, large. The thing with these is they do a ton more damage, create a lot more heat, and they have less range. So, as with most clan energy weapons, I don't really think that they're worth it, really. They're very heat inefficient, so the amount of damage that you do with these is very, I don't know, it doesn't seem worth it to me. As you can see, it creates more heat than damage, which is not really something you want. Medium lasers are slightly better. Small lasers, I think, will be the most efficient, as they usually are. So the big thing with these is the heavy laser range has incredible duration. That's even worse than the standard laser range. So let's take the worst culprit for laser duration for the clans, which is the clan ER large laser, right? So we take that and we look at duration, it's 1.35, and then we look at the clan heavy large laser, it's 1.7. That is a huge difference, and something that can definitely be felt when you're testing these out. They last absolutely forever. You will be staring at the enemy for way, way, way too long. And I don't feel like these are really worth it right now. They have pretty poor range, make way too much heat, they weigh a lot. I just don't feel like they're really worth taking as they are right now. Just not impressive. They're probably going to do some tweaking with these, but seeing as how they're kind of reworking the whole energy spectrum as a whole, I don't expect any drastic changes. But, you know, one can hope that they would make these slightly better. So, and oh yeah, in addition, for energy weapons, they incorporated a light tag, which is just a tag laser with a lower range and it weighs less. So, nothing special there. So that's it for energy weapons. We'll go straight into missiles. And I think let's see. Yeah, the only thing they got added for clans was the ATMs, and that's not automatic teller machine. That is Advanced Tactical Missile System. So these things are quite strange. I'll leave the stats up here for ATM-12. So these things use the lock-on mechanic that streak missiles and LRMs do. So you can still deadfire these if you want. It wouldn't be very effective. These things home very well. So like a streak, they're pretty much guaranteed to hit if you have a lock. The way these things work is their damage varies depending on the distance. So if you're up close, they're going to deal a lot of damage per missile. If you're further away, they're supposed to deal about the same amount of damage as, say, an LRM would per missile. So these things are quite flexible in what they can do. They're not very ammo efficient from what I've seen, and they're kind of middle of the road when it comes to heat management and cooldown. So I don't think they're going to wow you or anything like that, but they're a nice middle ground between the short-range streaks and the longer-range LRMs. Now, unfortunately, these ATMs also have a minimum range, which I don't like personally. So I think it's like 160, 180 meters or something like that minimum range. And when that happens, these won't even deal reduced damage. They don't deal any damage at all from what I've seen. They just bounce off. So that's something to watch out for. These aren't the cure-all missiles for the clans. They definitely have a specialized role. So yeah, these things, they're interesting. I would wait to see how these perform in a live environment before I give any more judgment on them. But as it stands right now, I think they're pretty cool. They're kind of fun. Whether or not these work with Artemis, I don't think they do, because I don't think in tabletop they did either, because they're so specialized, they kind of work on their own. Now, unfortunately, the thing that really made these ATMs in tabletop was the fact that you could have so many ammo types for them. Unfortunately, there is nothing like that in this game, so these are just your regular run-of-the-mill missiles. So that's unfortunate. You can't change the missiles, but it's not a deal breaker. So we'll see where these things go in a live environment. I don't think many people are going to try them out because there is a huge bias against players using lock-on weapons to begin with. You know, like people think streaks and LRMs are, you know, no skill and whatever else you want to say about them. But I think they're pretty neat, and I think they will find a spot in certain mechs. So that is it for weapon systems. For equipment, the clans also got a light active probe. Now this thing is interesting because from what the site said, it doesn't take up any slots, but it does here. So I don't really know where they were going with that. It wouldn't make sense for this to not take up any slots. But it does. So this thing weighs a half a ton less than a regular active probe, but it has less range than a regular active probe. I forget how much exact range it was, but it does all the same exact things as a regular clan active probe would. It just has less range. So very niche kind of thing. I don't expect to see these everywhere. Very specialized. So that's it. In addition, Oh, I don't have an AMS slot in here. Clans also get the LAMs, or laser AMS as well. From what all I've seen, it works basically the same exact way as a Inner Sphere one does. It doesn't run out of ammo, but it generates heat when it's firing. So, pretty basic, pretty simple stuff. So that is it for equipment and weapons for the Civil War update. A lot of cool stuff coming out. I am really excited to see all this stuff come out. See how they tweak it, see how it plays in a live environment, and like I said before, I'm not going to test it or I'm not going to give you guys gameplay for the public tests because I don't feel like it'd be representative enough of a test or a public, live environment. So I don't want people to get the wrong idea and say, oh, this weapon system sucks, or oh, this weapon system's overpowered because of X reasons. It's so easy to do this, that, the other. No. I don't believe in that. So I think people say the sky is falling all the time, and really it's not. It's not that bad. So I will let you guys make your own decisions and own judgments based on the information I have provided here already. But I play this game for fun, and I definitely think this update is going to be extremely fun when it comes out. It's just going to be, I think it's going to be a good time. So if you want more stats on these things to look up, Sarna is definitely an excellent resource to look up. Obviously not all the stats are going to be the same because some of it gets lost in translation to the MechWarrior game from tabletop, of course. But for the most part, it's a good resource to use. So yeah, that's all the equipment. And if you guys want, from the time this video was recorded, public test is still available for people if you want to try it. I would highly encourage you to, so you can form your own opinions, and of course take your feedback to the devs in any way you see fit. So that is it for me, and yeah, it's let's stay excited, let's stay positive about the Civil War update. I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I hope you guys are too. And with that, I'll call it end of this video, and yeah, I hope it was informative. Y'all have a good one.